So this is a book. None of this is for sale. I'm just showing you these as a reference. That's E. Cleveland. This is a book. And this book amazed me. We had it in our library, People of Color in the Bible. This is series volume 1. And this book has so many E.G. White quotes in it and A.T. Jones. So I just found that so amazing. And in the Free at Last, there's most of these titles of the chapters are songs, spirituals. So spiritual, we all know what a spiritual is. What is it? Tell me, what is a spiritual? What makes it a spiritual? Huh? The what? Okay, you had your hand up?
Yeah, if I were to describe it, to the best of my knowledge, these are hymn or songs that were especially introduced by the slaves, and these songs helped them to survive their slavery and to help them emotionally overcome their slavery and kept them
Focused,
rooted in their hope of going to Canaan eventually.
Right. So was there someone else? Most of the songs, most of the spirituals, they have a deeper meaning. Symbolism, right? So they have, okay, for example, let's pretend that I am a slave. So my master, I didn't want him to understand and know what I was talking about to my brothers and sisters. So I would say something, like going to Canaan land, and the master wouldn't understand it. Oh, I got shoes. That's a perfect song. You heard that before? I got shoes, you got shoes, all God's children got shoes. When they get to heaven, gonna put on my shoes and gonna walk all over God's heaven. But the slaves didn't have no shoes. So the master didn't understand that. But he was saying, the slave was singing, saying, when I get to heaven, to go through that the tragedies that they went through, they always had to keep their mind focused on other places like heaven. Is that clear? They couldn't keep their mind focused on this because they'll be frustrated, disappointed, and the list just goes on and on, right? So to keep your mind focused on Jesus, they came up with these songs. And they had deeper meaning, symbolism. So that's how they communicated. So a lot of the spirituals, I have a Trouble Won't Last Always, and most of them are not correct English, but it's English that you will understand. For instance, Trouble Won't Last Always. You've heard this is in our hymn book, Were You There? Ride on King Jesus, God is Real. There's another song here that says, Hold On, Jacob's Ladder. These are just different songs that were written. On My Journey Now, My God, What a Morning, Daniel Saw the Stone. So these songs were just written to give each other hope, a greater hope than what was actually going on in their lives at that time. So even as Seventh-day Adventists, in the last days, we will have to have that same vision, that same hope, because in the last days, when we all going through tribulation, we separated from our families, right? Separated from loved ones. We probably can't imagine this now, but we separated, right? No food, no water, but we still got to stay focused because Jesus is our Savior. And it's going to be some physical, It will be mental, physical, emotional for all of us at that time. So, that's something that all of us need to think about and pray about, that God will help us to all be ready. So before we get into the PowerPoint, which we'll do next, I have these flashcards just to make it a little bit exciting for all of us. So, I have a question before the flashcards. Has anybody ever, this is piggybacking on last week's message when we had the survey and everything, remember? This, when you and I stood up here? Yeah. So you remember me looking into your eyes. Okay. So has anybody raised your hand if you have ever in your life experienced prejudice or racism towards you? Or you've seen it against somebody else? Just 3 or 4 hands. So, okay. So, but how did you feel? Powerless? How'd you feel? Sad? Did you have your hand up? No? Who else? How'd you feel?
Frustrated, annoyed.
Okay. Did you have your hand up? How did you feel? Sad. So all of us will feel different ways when we are treated unjustly, right? That's the bottom line, being treated unjustly, being treated in a way that we do not deserve. Is that right? Okay. So I have a few cards here. You may not know the answer. Let me see. Do I have my glasses? Jamie? Sure. Yeah, you can just pick a card and just ask the question. That'd be great. Mm-hmm. You can take the mic. And then after that, we can go into the PowerPoint.
So I'm just going to randomly read some questions and just raise your hands and then I'll call on you. So let's see here. Oh, it looks like these are hints. Hold on. So who was the Prime Minister of Ghana between 1957 and 1960? Does anybody know that?
Can you ask it louder?
Ask it again. Okay, so who was the Prime Minister of Ghana between 1957 and 1960? Starts with a K. I don't think so. Okay, let me give you another hint. He helped organize the 5th Pan American Congress in Manchester, England in 1945. No guesses? Okay. Should I just tell you guys the answer? Okay. Well, obviously he was popular at some time. I mean, I don't know, like not now maybe, but his name is Kwame Nkrumah. Thank you. Yeah, I felt like I was going to butcher that one. Yeah, this is his picture, you guys. I apologize for being so microscopic. Let me see if I can find an easier one. Ooh, okay, let's do this one here. This one's cool. Okay, she was an engineer and a former NASA astronaut, and she was the 3rd African-American woman to go into space. You guys should know this one, hopefully. Starts with the J. Any guesses? Okay, if y'all start pulling out ChatGPT, I mean, I know, y'all are going to do it. Go ahead, if you guys don't have any other options. Yeah, so that's why you should remember her. Yes. No, absolutely not. John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt was a guy, not a girl. All right, so no guesses. So her name was Joanne, oh my word, okay. Higginbotham. Joanne Higginbotham. Yeah, that's her picture. All right, so let's see here. All right, here's another one. Yeah, you guys didn't study very well for this. Just saying. All right, so this guy was a novelist, an essayist, a playwright, a poet, and an African American social critic. Yes. Finally, we should have prizes. Good job. Okay, this one isn't actually a person, it's an event. So, successful anti-slavery and anti-colonial insurrection overthrowing the French. You history buffs out there. This one's easy. No, not the French Revolution. It was a revolution, but not the French. Successful anti-slavery and anti-colonial insurrection overthrowing the French. So, and it has to do with African American history. Okay, I'm going to give you guys another hint. It was the only slave uprising that led to the founding of a state free from slavery and ruled by non-whites and former captives. It was Haiti, the Haitian Revolution. Yeah, close. Yeah, you guys should have known that. That was an easy one. Even I knew that one. But I would have known it before. But yeah, okay. All right, I feel like this one you guys might know, nicknamed the Prophet. So I don't know if that's a good hint or not. No. Not Moses. No, it's a guy. I should have said that. I'm sorry, it's a guy, yeah. So his nickname is the Prophet. Okay, let's see here. He was an enslaved African American who led a rebellion of slaves and free blacks. Good guess, but no. No, good guess. Okay, his fight for freedom killed 55 white supremacists. Okay, I'll give you the first name, Nat. Yes. Okay, now this one is going to be really easy because someone already mentioned the name. So I'm not even going to give you a very good hint. Let's go with, I'm going to start with the hard one. In 1838, he escaped by pretending to be a sailor. Or maybe that was easy. Yes. You guessed that, didn't you? Yeah. But it's Frederick Douglass. All right. Okay, this is one of my favorites. She's a lady, and she... No. Okay. She was a voting rights activist, a civil rights leader, and a philanthropist. Oh, my word. I always have trouble saying that. Good guess, but no. So she helped the poor and needy families in her Mississippi community, and she was a vice chair of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Her name starts with an F. F. Fannie. No. Okay, Fannie Lou Hamer. Ooh, this one's going to be fun. Okay, this was a lady. No, actually think like way back, like before the times of Jesus. Yeah, she was a biblical figure. She's mentioned like a couple times in the Bible. Yes, the Queen of Sheba. Did you guess that or did you use ChatGPT? Well, that was good. That was great. I love it. I'm trying to find one that I'm not going to butcher the name. Okay, I'm random, but a very, very important aspect of history. Okay, so this is not like a specific person. This is definitely like a historical group of people. And your first guess is it was the first great Mesoamerican civilization. No, but close. No. It starts with an O. The what? No. Mm-mm. Okay. Let's see here. So they were known for monumental sacred complexes, massive stone sculpture, ball games, chocolate, drinking. Okay, why did they put that on there? Animal gods. No, it's a culture. And their specific culture. Yeah, chocolate. So they had very distinct African features, even though they lived in like Central America. Okay, do we give up? No? Okay. O, L, and then there's 3 more letters. No. Yes. Was that you, Joshua? Yep, good guess. You're right. Yeah, did you look it up? Did you look it up? No, you just guessed? That's awesome. I love how we're just asking people if like you're using ChatGPT because it's like a real thing nowadays. Like half of my classmates use it to do their homework. I don't. Just to be honest. Okay. So we got another lady here. She was the first black female and self-made millionaire in America. Pretty big accomplishment. No. Good guess though, but no. Definitely not. Okay, let's see here. Let me see. Well, she was in the Women's Hall of Fame in New York. No, she was mostly famous for her marketing line of beauty and hair products for black women. So, looks like she lived between 1867 and 1919. Okay, well, her name, if you guys are going to give up, is Madam C.J. Walker. Uncle Jonathan, how many more do you want to do? That's good? Okay. So are we ready to go into the presentation?
Yeah. Before we go to the PowerPoint, I was going to share some pictures of me. And this is my mom. That's a picture of me and my mom. And that's a picture of me and my mom. But that's see Gwen in the background? Yeah. Yeah, it's blurry. That's a picture. Is that better? That's a picture of me and my mom and Gwen, my sister. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Oops. I was trying to. What is wrong with this? I'm not trying to edit. That's a picture of me and my sister. So when I was little, I was adopted. And this white family adopted me. That's one of my sisters. And I thought this lady was joking. This lady came up to me and said, "Hey, you know what? I want you to be my son." I said, "Yeah, right." I'm little. I'm saying, what is she talking about? So she consulted my parents and my siblings. She consulted her family, her husband, and her children, and they all agreed. So, hello? Yeah, they got permission. That's consulting. I'm not who? Orphan? Is that what he said? No. When you invite me for dinner, I'll explain more. Yeah. So I just want to say that whatever we're learning, that we need to share and educate others, because in our society a lot is going on, right? And unfortunately, some people are being hurt. Some people, it's just affecting all of us. So just want to share that. And so Izzy is going to come up with a PowerPoint. You going to use that or this?
I'll probably use this one for a little bit. So I'm actually not starting out on this. My mom, Anna Paula, is going to present first. And she's going to be talking about the history of oppression and slavery in Brazil. So I'm going to go ahead and invite her up here, and then after that, my dad's going to be presenting a little bit, and then I'll come back to finish up.
gotta say that it was quite disappointing to know this history from Brazil. I didn't know it. Brazil's history of slavery is rooted in the exploitation of indigenous peoples and also millions of enslaved Africans. Slavery was a fundamental part of Brazil's economy for over 300 years. And Brazil was the world's largest importer of enslaved Africans. So it lasted for nearly 350 years from the mid of 16th century until abolition in 1888. It involved not only indigenous peoples, but also millions of black Americans, black Africans. Brazil enslaved more people from Africa than any other country, with nearly 5 million kidnapped Africans brought to Brazil. The Portuguese, they began relying on slavery to work the sugar plantations. And also when they found diamonds and gold in Brazil, they also heavily relied on slavery. These are some pictures of them working. Some of them, they were chained and they suffered in very inhumane manners by the Portuguese. They were subjected to physical abuse, including whippings and torture, and were often punished for disobedience or attempting to escape. In 1888, May 13th, Princess Isabel, she was a princess then in Brazil, she promulgated the Golden Act, which was the abolishment of slavery. That's a picture of her. So finally, 1888, that was the end of slavery in Brazil.
So that's really cool. That was a very brief history of the slavery in Brazil. Beautiful, but unfortunately so sad that it took so long for people to realize that slavery is just absolutely immoral and inhumane. So next up we have Ellen G. White in the SDA's Church's Legacy. And this is going to be dealing with kind of like the Adventist Church and how we played a big deal in like abolition. So my dad, Jamie, is going to be talking about that.
Yeah, so I'll let you do the switching. Right, so I had the pleasure of doing some research this week and learning some things that I did not know about the early history of our own church, its relationship with abolition, and even the original Millerite movement itself. I learned that we have multicultural roots within the Millerite movement. The Millerite movement included 3 black ministers who were very important, play a role in advancing the Millerite message that Christ was coming soon and that they believed it would be around 1843. So William Steele was an abolitionist, a black minister. He was also a key conductor on the Underground Railroad. We all know what that was, so he was helping his fellow slaves escape to freedom in Canada. William Steele was one of the ministers of the Millerite movement. Charles Bowles, he was a Free Will Baptist itinerant pastor. This man served in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War, and he advocated against slavery. He was also a minister in the Millerite movement. John Lewis, we don't know as much about him, but he was also a black minister. He was an active messenger of the Millerite movement as well. So these are men who played a role in telling the world that Jesus was coming soon. And they did that, you remember, this was late 1830s, early 1840s. We hadn't even gotten to the Civil War yet. Slavery was very strong at that time. Now It's interesting when we think about the gift of prophecy, how important that we cherish this gift within our Adventist community. Before Ellen White was ever given this gift, two men were given the gift before her. Both of those men passed the torch. They weren't willing to carry that gift. The very first man who the Lord selected was a black minister, which is something to think about. William Ellis Foy, he was the first person that God selected for the gift of prophecy. And I know that, he struggled with the whole prejudice issue, knowing that it's hard to be a prophet. It would be even harder to be a black man with that gift. So the Civil War period, do you know that we had a couple of church pillars, early leaders in our church who were very involved in abolitionism? Can you name me two people in early church history who were conductors of the Underground Railroad within they're members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? No, but keep on guessing. What's that? So what else was? What did you say, Jose? No, we don't have historical records to suggest that she was involved in the Underground Railroad, but Ellen White was very, very vocal and supported abolitionism. So, good guess. How about the very first president of the General Conference? Anybody know his name? John Byington. The very first president of our General Conference was known to be a conductor of the Underground Railroad. Yeah, wow. Wow. So John Byington became president, our first president, in 1863. What was happening in 1863? Civil War. Civil War is raging. We elect our first president of the General Conference, and this man was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Powerful. Yeah. So he had a farm in New York, and his farm was one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. He regularly entertained fugitive slaves in his home. He was known to be an active abolitionist. He withdrew, before he became a Seventh-day Adventist, he withdrew his membership from the Methodist Episcopal Church because of its opposition to abolitionism. So he withdrew. He became the first president of the General Conference in 1863. So there's another early leader in our church who was known to participate in the Underground Railroad. This person, you would know his son very well. You might not know him as well, but you would know his son very well. His son was very well known in the medical field. John Harvey Kellogg, his father was John P. Kellogg. His father and mother were both involved in the Underground Railroad. Yep. So John P. Kellogg and his wife Ann Jeanette Stanley Kellogg, parents of John Harvey, were involved in abolition. Their home served as a station on the Underground Railroad. They helped slaves to escape to Canada through their civil disobedience. So Ellen White, I heard her name mentioned as well. And if you look at her statements on slavery, she boldly opposed it. And she advocated that Seventh-day Adventists should violate the fugitive slave laws. And she wrote this in 1859. She said, quote, the law of our land requiring us to deliver a slave to his master, we are not to obey. And we must abide by the consequences of violating this law. So it seems to me that she was very vocal in telling fellow Adventists that we cannot obey this law. At the same time, we should not make a big deal when we're punished for disobeying it. In response to the Civil War, she had this to say about God bringing judgment against America for the high crime of slavery. She said, God will punish the South for the sin of slavery and the North for so long suffering its overreaching and overbearing influence. So Mrs. White was very vocal in her opposition to slavery and in her counsel to fellow Seventh-day Adventists that we should be civilly disobedient and should not help, restore a slave to their master under any circumstance. Just want to go over a brief overview of the history of the church and its outreach to the black people. So, through the first 30 years of the organization of our church, 1860 to 1890, we didn't make a lot of progress in extending the gospel to the black community, unfortunately. In fact, during this time, we were out-missionaried by other Christian organizations, including the Catholic Church. So we didn't start out well in terms of our outreach to black people in general. But we do know that the first black Seventh-day Adventist church was established here in Tennessee, and that was in 1886 in Edgefield Junction. I'm not sure where that's at, but Edgefield Junction, 1886, the first black Seventh-day Adventist church was established. And it was established by a man that we know as the father of black Adventists, which is Charles M. Kinney, C.M. Kinney. The second Seventh-day Adventist church was established not far from here, Louisville, Kentucky, in 1890 by a black minister, Alonzo Berry. He was a tireless black pastor, missionary. He was known for traveling extensively, preaching and promoting the Adventist faith. So from the 1850s to the 1860s, we have on record Ellen White condemning slavery, calling it a sin that God would punish our nation for. As we get into the 1870s, again, we have on record Ellen White calling for our church to reach out to the freed black slaves for the purpose of uplifting them spiritually and materially. Two-pronged approach. She was calling upon our church to reach out, to uplift the freed black slaves spiritually and materially. Moving into the 1880s, again, Ellen White is calling for the establishment of churches, schools, and training centers to serve the freed black slaves. And she encouraged the leadership, she encouraged that the leadership of black churches should have black representation, that they should have leadership in their own structures. In 1891, something pivotal happened within our church. It was at the 29th General Conference session in Battle Creek, Michigan. Ellen White was not present, but she sent a message to that General Conference session, and it was read before the delegates. And the message was our duty to the colored people. That message was read to the General Conference session, and with words of authority, she declared that God had shown her many things regarding the black race, and quote, sin rests upon us as a church because we have not made great effort for the salvation of souls among the colored people, unquote. That was in her message to the General Conference session in 1891. It's impossible to talk about the history of the black community within our church without constantly referring to the contributions of Ellen White. In fact, the early black pioneers who raised up the early churches, the early black churches, they constantly pointed to Ellen White as a source of their inspiration and their guidance. So we really owe a debt of gratitude to Ellen White for the momentum that she invested into propelling the work of the gospel being shared with the black slaves here in this country. In response to that message that was shared in 1891, it was her own son, who really responded to that call. And he was not really, walking well in the footsteps of Jesus at the time that she gave the message, but he had a reconversion experience, and he launched the Morning Star, and there it is. So the Morning Star was a mission boat. It traveled the rivers of the South, and it had a chapel on board. It served as missionary headquarters for Edson White, his family, and others who joined him in this endeavor. And this mission boat had tremendous influence in sharing the gospel with the black people in the South. So here are some of the notable early Seventh-day Adventist black leaders who were inspired by Edson White or who were brought directly to the Lord through his ministry. One of them is Charles M. Kinney, the father of Black Adventism. Now, Charles was not brought to the Lord through Edson White's ministry, but they both had a collaborational relationship. So Charles Kinney directed black people to Edson White's ministry for training, and Edson White was involved in training them and bringing them back into other parts of the South to raise up additional churches and schools. So there was collaboration between C.M. Kinney and Edson White. Louis Sheaf, he was a black pastor and evangelist, and he was converted to Adventism through the work of Edson White in 1896. He was a Baptist minister. He was converted to Adventism through the work of Edson White. He became a powerful evangelist, and he himself founded several Seventh-day Adventist black churches. Pastor Louis Sheaf, Pastor Sidney Scott, pastor and educator. He also became a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church because of and through the work of Edson White. He became Sidney Scott became a pastor and an educator, and he worked with new black converts to promote their literacy, to educate them, and help to raise them up, out of poverty and ignorance. Jesse Clifford was another person that was influenced by the work of Edson White. He was a teacher, a school founder, and he became a leading educator of black students. And he helped establish schools for education and vocational training. J.E. Rogers, another black missionary and educator, he became a medical worker. He advocated for improved medical care within the black communities. So these are some of the early leaders within the black community who were affected by or actually literally brought into the gospel through the work of Edson White and the Morning Star missionary boat. There were some institutions that were directly started by the Morning Star mission work. One of those was, the Morning Star School itself in Vicksburg, Mississippi, was started first on this boat, and then they moved from the boat to a structure, in Vicksburg, Mississippi. So the Morning Star Mission School in Vicksburg, Mississippi was started in 1895. In 1896, Huntsville School, which we know as Oakwood University, was started. It was started through the advocacy of Ellen White and of Edson White, because after starting the Morning Star Mission School, Edson White, Ellen White, started to work on the General Conference and say, we need more school presence for the black freed slaves. We need an institution that is bigger than this mission boat. We need something that can meet the needs of more of these brothers and sisters in Christ. And through their advocacy, awareness was made of the need, funds were raised, and Huntsville School was started, and that's now known as Oakwood University. That was 1896. 1899, again, this is work that came as a result of the Morning Star. Yazoo City Industrial School was set up by Edson White. That was 1899. And then another school he set up in 1900, Natchez Mission School. And again, focusing on literacy and Bible work. And it became a church and a school, the Natchez Mission School. And I'm going to mention 4 churches that were either directly established or established through the influence of people who've been brought into the faith through the work of the Morning Star mission boat. So 4 churches that were started in addition to what I've already shared. One was the Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. So not directly started by Edson White, but those who were influenced through his mission work actually started that church. Okay? 1906. Of course, the Vicksburg Seventh-day Adventist Church in Mississippi, that was established directly by Edson White. The New Seventh-day Adventist Church, early 1900s. So the missionary expansion, which began with his work, led to the establishment of this church in New Orleans, early 1900s. And then the Jackson Seventh-day Adventist Church in Mississippi, not Tennessee, but the Jackson Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded by Edson White's work. So this is some of the history of the early Seventh-day Adventist Church in relationship to extending gospel to the freed black slaves. And now you know a little bit more about even the involvement of black ministers in the Millerite movement itself. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Jamie. So Berean in Atlanta, the gardener, the gardeners, they came into the church and started going to that church. Berean. I've been to that church many times. I did not know that history. So I think Easy's going to get into some more history about Annanite, and
Yeah,
when you get to that part, call me.
I will. Okay, so raise your hand if you learned something new today already. All right, that's great. Well, I definitely have. That was really cool. I didn't know half the stuff that you just talked about, which is important because that's why we're here today, right? We're here to learn about new stuff. We're here to celebrate Black history and culture. So I'm just going to start off with a Bible verse here that I have. It's one of my favorites, and this is from the Living Standard Bible. And it says, "Those from among you will rebuild the ancient waste places. You will raise up the foundations of past generation upon generation, and you will be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths for one to inhabit." And so basically what I'm touching on today are some very important individuals in not only the SDA church, but also in general, that were, as I see it, definitely repairers of the breach and restorers of that path. So we are going to start with someone that you guys probably have never heard of. And his name is called William J. Hardy. So I didn't even know about this guy until like 3 days ago, maybe. And I was looking up on this website called, I believe it's blacksdahistory.com. Don't quote me on that because I'm not sure now. But it basically gives like a whole different overview of like different people that were like African American or black and that have ties to the Adventist church, whether they were raised Adventist or became Adventist later. And this guy here, he's actually really cool because Mrs. White and James White and John Byington, who we talked about earlier, all mentioned him. So he was born in New York State, as we can see here in 1823, and then he moved to Michigan with his parents. And the coolest thing about him is he was the first black elected official in Michigan, which I think is really cool. I'm kind of into politics, so I like this guy. So in 1872, actually, hold on, let me give a little bit of history. So in 1870, I believe it was the 15th Amendment of the Constitution was passed that allowed African Americans to vote. And so in 1872, he becomes the first African American elected to public office in Michigan. And specifically, if you're wondering what, he was a supervisor of the Gaines Township, which was basically kind of like a county. So Michigan politics are a little bit different. They have townships, and being a supervisor is kind of like not exactly a mayor, but similar to a mayor. They do have mayors in Michigan, but it's kind of like not the secretary, but they do a lot of the work. Like they work with like the Chamber of Commerce, and they have like all the reports for finances and stuff for the town. So this is what this guy was doing in 1872, which is kind of interesting because if we think about a lot of the history that was happening in the South at this time, Jim Crow laws are kicking in hard. And so it's really cool to see a black man taking power, even if it was in the North. He was also an Adventist pioneer. So this guy here, another reason why I like him so much is, according to AI, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, he was the first African-American member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He joined in 1852. And another thing about him that's really cool is his son, Eugene Hardy, would make history as the first African-American to graduate from high school in Michigan. So again, this guy is making history. I mean, he's the first black elected official. His son is the first one to graduate high school in Michigan as a black man. So he has 6 children. He marries Eliza Watts in 1844. And Mrs. White wrote something about him, and I'm just going to read it here. Although the house is poor and old, everything is arranged in neatness and exact order. The children are well behaved, intelligent, and interesting. May I yet have a better acquaintance with this dear family. So she would stay at his house a lot when she went up to like do different things in Michigan. I found a couple other journal entries which I didn't put on here, but James White and John Byington both mentioned in their journals about this family and said they were very kind and hospitable. So that's kind of a fun fact. I like this guy a lot, but we're going to move on. Okay, this is annoying. So I have a picture of him, but unfortunately it's not wanting to show up. So this is this guy's lovely picture, but I will put it on full present mode so I can read stuff. So sorry, you guys won't be able to see him. So this guy, you guys probably know who he is. He's a pretty decently famous dude in American history. So he was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1908, and he was the great-grandchild of slaves. His name was actually Thorogood, but he shortened it to Thurgood. I probably would have done the same, not gonna lie. He changed it in 2nd grade because he didn't like having to spell it out. Very smart. So he graduates from Lincoln University in 1930. He was an honor student, which is really cool. He was also, well, I don't know if he was a lawyer, but he earned his law degree from Howard University. So another reason why I like this guy. He graduated first in his class, so he probably had a 4.0 GPA. Let's see here. His biggest civil rights victory was as an attorney. Typo. Anyways, the Murray versus Pearson case, where he successfully challenged the University of Maryland segregation policy. So basically, at this time in American history, there was a lot of stuck-up Americans who did not want to go to school with people of color. They didn't like it because they thought they were superior because they were white, which is crazy. So anyways, this guy goes and challenges them, and he's like, guys, this is not right, and he wins. So later, he ends up working with the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and he became its chief counsel. And he was going to argue a lot of important civil rights cases, including the landmark Brown versus Board of Education, which outlawed segregation in public schools across the U.S. And then finally, in 1967, he became the first African American to be appointed as a Supreme Court justice, and he served until 1991. So that is one cool guy, definitely one of my favorites. But we cannot go on before we acknowledge a couple of my absolute favorite quotes by this guy. This guy was amazing. So, quote number 1. Where you see wrong or inequality or injustice, speak out, because this is your country. This is your democracy. Protect it. Pass it on. So just something to think about. This is our country. This is our democracy. And even today, sometimes we see different things. You know, we see hate crimes. We see racism still. It's still not gone. And we really need to make sure that we are doing something. We are doing our part and passing on that torch of freedom for the next generation. Okay, quote number 2. The measure of a country's greatness is its ability to retain compassion in times of crisis. And I feel like this is a really big one. You could probably preach a sermon on this. But it's so true, you know. We need to be compassionate in times of crisis. And right now, America, you could say, is in a crisis. I mean, there's so much stuff happening. There's so much pain. And as American citizens, and even if we're not American citizens, just as Christians, it's our duty to show compassion. Okay, here's another favorite. Partially because she's a woman, and I'm a woman. So I love to see women in history because I feel like a lot of times men make history, but we don't talk so much about women. So this is why I'm highlighting several very important women. So this lady, Miss Rosa Parks, so she was born in Tuskegee, Alabama on February 4, 1913, and she's definitely a civil rights activist. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing she's known for. She, again, worked with the NAACP, and she worked as a secretary for the Montgomery chapter. Now, obviously, her biggest thing, if you hear the word or the phrase Montgomery bus boycott, I mean, that's like everybody knows. Like, that was her. That was the girl that was like, nope, you're not taking my seat. So on December 1, 1955, she refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery bus, leading to her arrest. And I should have put a picture up there. There's like this really cool mugshot of her being led away by these 2 white police officers, and she was not ashamed. She was standing her ground. I love that picture. I should have put it up. This act of defiance sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, a pivotal event in the civil rights movement. But she was not the first. So there was another girl named Claudette Colvin, and she was like 15, so she was young. But she did the same thing 9 months earlier. So technically, we could argue that the bus boycott started with her, but it didn't really like do anything until this lady stepped up. But yeah, either way, they were both very pivotal. And she left a very amazing legacy because afterwards, a few years later, the Browder versus Gale case in 1956 made segregation on public buses unconstitutional. So first we see the outlawing of segregation in the school system and then also in the bus system. And she is often referred to as the mother of the civil rights movement. And I would have to agree, definitely would have to agree. She was great. Okay, so here's another one. Did you want to say something on this one? Sure. Okay, so Anna Knight, I will let you talk about her.
Okay. So we looked at earlier about the Mr. White had it was a boat, but it was in Mississippi. So on that boat, a lot of people learn how to about Jesus and how much Jesus loves them, that type of thing. But Anna Knight is related to my wife. So I've been to the gravesite and seen Anna Knight's picture. She was a wonderful lady. She was the first black missionary to go to India. And when she came back, she had a school, but unfortunately, she was preaching to the community about making booze. That's what they used to do back then, right? And they got mad at her and they burned the school down. I think they burned the boat too. But yeah, they got rid of them because people didn't like what they were doing as far as preaching the truth and helping others. You got to remember now, all the other churches, the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Catholic Church, all of those churches wanted slavery, except for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. All those churches split over slavery, except for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because they were abolitionists. So that's very important.
So basically, if you're not already a proud Adventist, you should be now. Basically, that's what he's saying. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so here's another one, which I think you also wanted to talk about, right? Alma Blackman?
Yeah. So
All right.
a lot of this is just personal because it is. So I took voice lessons from her. And for her to accept you to take voice lessons, you had to have something special from God. So if in our hymn book, this hymn book, she helped write this. Her name is in the hymn book. So, I would go to her house to have special voice lessons from her in Atlanta, Georgia. So, and a lot of the hymns, of course, she was on the committee to help choose some of the songs, and matter of fact, all of the spirituals in there are by her.
So raise your hand if you grew up listening to like This Little Light of Mine. Like every single person in here should raise their hand. Like this is like a Adventist campfire song. Like when you have a bonfire, like you sing that. Okay, so again, this is according to ChatGPT. So I don't know how accurate this is, but according to ChatGPT, she apparently arranged This Little Light of Mine and also Rise Up, Shepherd, and Follow. Both in the hymnal, look it up. I wish I had better research to back that up, but yes. That's super cool. A couple other fun facts about her. She taught school for 42 years, including 12 years at Oakwood College, which is now Oakwood University. And she was also an accomplished music teacher, as we just heard, and a choir director and a concert pianist. So again, I love this lady because she's a pianist, so super cool. All right, the next one. Okay, so we absolutely cannot talk about Black history without mentioning this guy. Like, if we don't mention this guy, then why did we come here? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of my absolute favorite people in history, other than Napoleon. Don't ask me why. So, he was born on January 15, 1929, and his father later changed his name. So he was originally named Michael King Jr., which that's cool too. I don't know, I see why his dad wanted to name him Martin, but I like Michael too. So either one works. So he changed it to Martin Luther King, or Martin Luther, because he really admired the Protestant reformer. Which in a way, I guess that is a really cool thing to name your kid, because if you think about it, he was a reformer. He really was a reformer. So really cool. So this guy, he was a gifted student, and he entered college at the age of 15. I wish I could have done that. So he graduates from Morehouse College with a degree in sociology, and he earns his PhD in systematic theology from Boston University in 1955. Now, obviously, you guys know him as like a civil rights leader, because that's basically what he was. So he plays a pivotal role in the American civil rights movement. Obviously, the Montgomery bus boycott is like one of the biggest things that he plays into. That was the 13-month protest that started when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to that guy. One of the most famous things he's famous for, like a third grader could probably tell you this, was his I Have a Dream speech. And it was delivered during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And it happened on August 28, 1963. And that would go down as one of the most famous speeches advocating for unity and equality. He was also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And fun fact about this guy, he was in prison 30 times. Now, generally speaking, it's not a good thing to go to prison, but this guy, I actually say, good for you, because he went to prison for standing up for the Black community. So, generally speaking, avoid prison, unless you like him, okay? Then it's fine. Okay. Unfortunately, as many of you guys probably know, he was assassinated on April 4, 1968, and it actually happened in Tennessee, in Memphis. And I believe the hotel is still there. You can still see it. Very tragic, unfortunately. But yes, he was one of the biggest voices in the civil rights movement, left behind a huge legacy. And again, this guy had some amazing quotes, and so we definitely have to talk about them. So this one right here, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness," literally one of my favorites. This has been one of my mottos for a while. I love this quote. So he says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And just a little bit of a background for this guy. So he grew up in a very, I would say, segregated community in Atlanta. And he faced a lot of backlash from people. He got a lot of hate growing up as a Black kid in the South, if that says anything. And he actually did. I believe he said trying to think here. This was before he turned 20. He said that he was determined to hate every single white person because he hated what they had done to his family, what they had done to his community, and he struggled with hate. And so for someone that struggled with hate so much to be able to say, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that, that takes a dramatic change of events, change of mindset. And so definitely I think he can teach us a lot of lessons on forgiveness and moving on. Another really cool one that really stuck out to me, he says, no one really knows why they are alive until they know what they would die for. And I feel like sometimes we don't take time to think about why are we living? Is there something we would die for? Because if we're just living for ourselves, if we're living to do whatever we want, then what's the point? There's got to be something we should die for, right? So that's what he's saying. And for him, it was literally the cause of freedom for the black community. And he literally ended up dying for that. So, for one, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And this one can apply to us. How many times do we sit there and we see people, whether it's being bullied or maybe we actually see racism. And maybe it's not targeted towards us, maybe it's targeted to other people. And we sit there and we're like, I don't want to do anything, it's not my problem. It is your problem. Because if you're sitting there and you're not going to do something about it, it is your problem. So our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. So let's remember that, even if, let's say we can't do something huge, we can still do something. We can say something. We can try to help stuff. And then the last one here says, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but because he must make it, because conscience tells him it is right. And honestly, I think that he definitely took that stance of it wasn't safe. It wasn't necessarily politically correct at this time. It wasn't popular. But he still took that stand to fight against racism. And I feel like as Christians, as American citizens, we can all agree that even if we don't have to face that right now, at some point we will have to make a stand for our beliefs. All right, moving on to a couple people in the present. So Dr. Ben Carson, this guy is so iconic. I love this guy. So raise your hand, how many of you guys have watched the movie? Okay, a few. And read the book? Okay, the book is great, the movie is great too. I would recommend doing both. Read the book, watch the movie. It's great. So this guy was born on September 18, 1951 in Detroit, Michigan, and he's still alive. He was raised by his single mom, shout out to mom, Sonia Carson, who worked multiple jobs to support the family. As a child, Carson struggled academically and had poor grades. However, his mother encouraged him to read and learn, which eventually led to his academic success. And I'm not sure if the book brings this out, but I remember in the movie, I think his mom was illiterate, so she didn't actually know how to read. And so that was hard. Yeah, I think he also had a problem with his eyes too. Yeah. So I remember one scene in the movie where he comes home and he has problems with his English homework. And she says, figure it out, sound it out. And he's like, well, can't you help me? She's like, no, I'm busy right now. Which is sad because, it shows really how many, it just shows how many people didn't have a very good education back then because of all the racial prejudice. So probably, I'm not sure. I feel like the biggest thing that he's known for is definitely being the neurosurgeon, not running for president in 2016, although he's definitely popular for that too. So his first surgery that actually successfully worked was in 1987 when he was able to separate two co-joined twins. And after that, I tried to look up the number of how many people, kids he's been able to separate, and there's no set amount. So unfortunately, I can't give you that information. But he's had a lot of successes. Obviously, we mentioned the book and the movie, so he's an author, Gifted Hands. And then in 2008, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the U.S. Pretty important, I would say. And then I obviously already mentioned his political career. He ran for president in 2016. If I was old enough, I probably would have voted for him, but I wasn't old enough back then. And then also, he served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development from 2017 to 2021. And then, along with his wife, Candy Carson, he funded the Carson Scholars Fund, which awards scholarships to students for academic excellence and humanitarian qualities. So this guy is very accomplished, highly respect him. I would love to meet him someday. And he just goes to show that, you know, even growing up in a small community with, you know, a single mother and even being African American and facing that racial prejudice, you can still rise above that and you can still become an amazing person. Okay, the last person I have on my list for today. This one is cool because she's a woman, and I don't know why. I love women in history. It's like one of my biggest things. So Dr. Hyveth Williams, and she's like super cool. Like this girl, she's like the first female senior SDA pastor, which I think is cool because she's African American plus being the first like female senior pastor. Go girl, like seriously. So she is currently the pastor at the Grace Place in South Bend, Indiana. And she holds a Bachelor's of Art in Theology from Columbia Union College, and then she went to Andrews University and got her Master's in Divinity. And she's a Doctor of Ministry from Boston University School of Theology. So this girl has been around. She's studied a lot. She's a professor of homiletics, which I did not even look that up, so I couldn't tell you what that is. So she teaches that at Andrews. And then she's also an author, so she's written several books. And she's also received quite a few awards, including the J.N. Andrews Medallion for Excellence in Teaching and the Daniel Osberger Excellence in Teaching Award. So again, another example of a black lady who's risen above and just surpassed, like, beyond, like, what society maybe, like, the constraints that society has put around her. She definitely has a lot of firsts, and I mean, to be a colored woman and a pastor, I would say that's pretty big. So definitely shout out to her. And the next section is going to be kind of fun. This one I feel like is going to be kind of like some audience engagement. So I want to invite Uncle Jonathan up, and I'm going to get another mic. And basically, I think we're going to ask some questions, and we'll just talk about it a little bit. We don't have to talk about it a lot. I'll start by saying I'm not a sports person, but I do have to share this quote. This was at Kendrick Lamar's halftime show during the Super Bowl. So I don't know how many of you guys have been following social media and have watched, or maybe not watched the whole thing, but have heard some of this stuff, like the message behind the halftime show
Has
performance.
anybody heard about?
Raise your hand. Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit because that's a pretty current event in Black history, and I feel like that's really cool for us to chat about. So, pretty popular quote that was made popular by Kendrick Lamar himself. The revolution's about to be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy. So.
So what that, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. So what that means, the revolution, this is about all of us, America. Okay, it's not just one group, it's America. We need to stand up because a lot of stuff is going on. And if we don't stand up, it will continue. So can you go back?
Sure.
The televised was the Super Bowl. I don't know how many millions of people watched it, but it's worldwide. Okay, so he thought about this and said, "I am going to present something, educate people, in an audience that's bigger than it has ever been before." It's a message. So that's the televised. You picked the wrong guy, meaning you picked him. He's going to tell the truth. So all the other Super Bowls was entertainment. This is one that was educational. That made the difference. Okay.
So I think it's really important for us, like, obviously I'm not sure how many people here are really into like rap music, but you know, it's not about the music, it's about the message. Mm-hmm. So we're discussing a little bit just like the message he was trying to portray to America. And there was like a lot of like different key things. Yeah, symbolisms, and obviously we don't have time to go through all of it, but I would just say, you know, if you're curious about like, you know, some of the things he was talking about, I will mention a couple things. So it opens up with like, it looks like a PlayStation control, symbolizing the fact that there's like this big game going on, and the game symbolizes like the American people and like really what's going on in our country right now.
So does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there was other things like the dancers he had, they were dressed in red, white, and blue, and they actually formed an American flag, but they were split in half. And so it symbolizes the division our country is going through even now. And, you know, he brought up some like cultural stuff back from like the Civil War too, like how our country super divided. You know, how there was the North and the South, and how the North didn't support slavery for the most part, and the South did. And even to this day, we still see racism. You know, it's not completely gone.
40 acres and a mule. He mentioned that. So does everyone know about that? 40 acres and a mule? She's saying no. So 40 acres and a mule, after slaves were free, supposedly, they didn't have money or anything to live. So the government says, we're going to give you 40 acres and a mule, which would have been great. But when that time came, they never got it. So he's saying in this video, the government always promises us things, but they never come through. So it just goes back. I mean, I just hope I don't start crying. The Native Americans, there's a book out, there's 1,000 years before Columbus. Matter of fact, Columbus went to the wrong place. He didn't come to the United States. He was in the Caribbean and thought he was in the U.S., but he did not discover America. So in our history books, it's teaching, we've already learned it, we've read it, Columbus discovered America, but that's not true. So what he's trying to say is we need to learn the truth. Turn your TV off. That's what he's saying. Don't worry about the media and the news. They're not giving us the correct information. Turn your TV off, get a book, and start reading it for yourself.
Yeah, he's a pretty famous rapper that performed at the Super Bowl. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we don't put the message out, the rock's gonna cry out, right? If we're not saying, hey, let's get along and love everybody and do this and do that, the rocks are gonna do it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So this is another one here. This guy right here, dressed as Uncle Sam, Samuel Jackson. That was another big one, which was another thing that was really symbolic. And this guy is portraying the American government. And
so Samuel L. Jackson is portraying Uncle Sam. Now, in every picture you probably ever seen, Uncle Sam has always been white. But this is the black Uncle Sam trying to educate everybody on this game, because the government plays games with us. We're in this game. We think we're surviving and doing things. We want to live for Jesus, but we're still in this game.
so I think it's just really cool, you know, like even though, like I said, you know, we may not be into the rap genre, or maybe you are, I don't judge. But it's really cool to see how this rapper brought out these different aspects that are very true, and that it's something to think about. It really gives us something to think about, you know. Like Uncle Jonathan was mentioning, he ends his whole show with turn the TV off. And really, should we be trusting everything that we see online? Probably not. You know, we should be able to do our own research, you know, and be able to, like the Bible says, give a good account for ourselves.
Well, I don't know if you have that quote up. The next one is, they're not like us.
Yeah. I don't have that quote up, but I think it'd definitely be great to go over that.
You want to say something? They're not like us. So we need to be more loving and kind and giving, so we won't be like them, whoever they are. All right? Is that pretty clear? We need to be like Jesus wholeheartedly and not like the world, because the world is not like us, right? We are not like the world.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful analogy. And there's a lot of like really cool things we can take from this. You know, Kendrick Lamar, one of the other things he was portraying was the fact that there's other people out there in the entertainment world that are taking advantage of young girls and sexually harassing them. And, you know, even the necklace that he's wearing, the A minor necklace, it's a very much of a statement piece talking about the fact that there's so many injustices being done to girls, and the fact that, you know, as citizens, we should be standing up against that.
So I think just this week, you may have gotten a message on your phone, right? About a kidnapping and alert. You didn't get that? Okay. So that kind of stuff is going on. You want to be more vigilant of your child and yourself and everything else, what's going on around you. He's talking about another person that that likes little girls. And he's saying that's not right. This is what's happening in our world today. You know, not to scare anybody, but even in Hickman County, we have some people that like little children in a bad way.
Yeah, so I guess the bottom line is here, there's a lot we can learn even from maybe things that we don't completely like listen to or whatever, you know. Again, Kendrick Lamar is just trying to bring out still some of the things that in this country need to be changed, you know, just like all of these people we just talked about, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. White and John Byington, you know, they were standing up for the slaves and doing their part. And now in our society, there's still things that we need to do too. And Kendrick Lamar is saying, you know, as Americans, you have a voice and use that voice because, like, I believe it was Thurgood Marshall or maybe it was Dr. King that said, you know, when you stand up for one person, you stand up for everybody.
One other quick comment. So it's not shown on the screen here, but one scene, all these guys come out of this car. That's representing we coming out of slavery, okay? It's representing also the Underground Railroad. Hundreds of people were freed because of the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad was all about secrecy. So a lot of these people weren't Seventh-day Adventists, but they were led by God. So to have to save people at night with no flashlight, walking I don't know how many miles to freedom as a woman, leading them, the Holy Spirit is saying, the Holy Spirit told her, no, don't go this way because they're over here going to harm you. Turn left. And she did, and she didn't lose a single slave just following God's voice.
Yeah, so I think, again, with Kendrick Lamar's show, it's just a powerful testimony to, you know, how we can use our voice and how there's still things that we can stand up for today. And that's basically what I want to leave you guys with as I finish this presentation is, you know, we have a voice and there's still a lot of injustice out there. We won't be able to make a huge difference, obviously. I mean, like, one person can't do much. But if we all get together and if we all, like, pursue justice and try to help the world, we can make it a better place.
Amen. Let's see. I'm going over my list, make sure I didn't miss anything. So at this time, we can have, do we have any closing remarks? Someone wants to share something before we end in prayer? Yeah, any questions? Something you didn't understand? If you want to know what we can do as an individual, you can always reach out, write letters to your congressman, the mayor. You know, these things can be done and prayerfully, you know, make a difference. I think at the end of the month, there's a boycott, right? February 20, nobody is buying anything that day. You heard about that? So this is nationwide, huh? The leadership, decisions that the leadership is making right now, and it will be affecting so many people, so that's why they're boycotting. A lot of things that some people in leadership roles that were voted for are doing things that will affect all of us.